All right, thank you guys so much. We have a kind of a news series today where I'm explaining my political worldview. Now, this is a warning. If for whatever reason you didn't see the title of this video, this will be political. I completely understand if you want to kind of kick me to the curb here. I know what it. Trust me, as someone on the right, I know what it feels like to hear someone open their mouth or just do anything. It could be art. It could be something. They produce work that you admire. That's apolitical, and then they open their mouth about politics, and all of a sudden you just kind of you can't view them the same way. Trust me, I know that feeling. More power to you. If you're worried my political views will ruin my lectures on Gebser, please do not take it out on Gebser. Use Gebser to defeat me politically, okay? That's all I ask. That's all I ask. So what we're going to be doing in this video today, this will be the first in this series. Now, this series will not be the same as my Kill Rationalism and my Seeing the World Integrally insofar as I can't imagine the series is going to be that long. Like those other series, I'm not going to stop Kill Rationalism anytime soon. I might not have done a video in a couple weeks just because I'm listening to time. Time is guiding me to make certain videos. Nonetheless, I could see myself doing that for years. I could see 100 Kill Rationalism videos. I could see 100 Seeing the World Integrally videos. That'll be years from now. Of course, my Gebser series, that'll stop when the book stops, and then this... Who knows? I have a feeling it's only going to be 4 to 5, but if I need to add to it, I will. So that's excuse me. That's what we're going to be doing today. Now, this video is going to be 3 sections. I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible, though I do think it's probably going to be pretty long. The first section is going to be why I disagree with the left, and it's going to be a bunch of vague generalizations. That's really what it comes down to. It's going to be a bunch of vague assertions that aren't supported by evidence. That will come. That'll be in the next video. What we're going to be doing in this video is just laying out the outlines. And then we're going to be filling in the dots as it goes. So don't think that by the end of this video, you think, well, it's nice to know your general beliefs, but do you have any, what are you pulling from? What makes your beliefs true? That's coming, so don't worry. Don't think I'm just coming in here to bluster and compensate by not being specific and just speaking with a bunch of conviction about a bunch of generalities. No one cares. If I were to stop this series on the end of this video, I wouldn't take me. I would not expect any of you to take me seriously, so I won't be doing that. Just give me that kind of benefit of the doubt. It will come. What else? I'm on the right. We can see the rationalism on display. So I posited the left, the political left, against, in a dualistic sense, the political right. These two negate each other, so one must be privileged over the other. Excuse me. That's a problem. As anyone who follows my Gebser series knows, this is a false framing, and it is not conducive necessarily to effective results. And when you deploy that false framing in a very consequential domain like politics, you're going to expect to see problems. So the right, so that is to say, we're going to be trying to be integral. So maybe by the end of this series or by the end of my Gebser series, we can create a new political, I won't say worldview because Gebser doesn't like that word, a new political vision that's integral in nature where we stop doing this dualistic one or the other. I think what the right gets right is they represent the Apollonian principle, order, reserve, calm judgment, directed logic, pleasures of the mind, very stoic, whereas the left is the Dionysian principle. The Apollonians, they create boundaries, objective boundaries to confer order. The Dionysians, they destroy the boundaries. They tear them down. They melt them down. They like sex, pleasure, revelry, emotion, pre-rational or irrational joy, stuff like that. It sort of shuns the Apollonian calm, quiet thought. You don't want to pit these two against each other. You want to integrate them into a balanced whole, and that's what we're going to be trying to do. Nonetheless, it's not like I read Gebser when I was 7 years old. So for the first 25, 6, 7, 8 years of my life, I've been doing it this way. So I have to kind of give it from that perspective now. What else? I also think, and the left, so I think what the right gets right, no pun intended, is... Generally speaking, I think they have the better solutions, and we'll get to that in a second. I think they're more rational, and I think when it's time to be rational, which in our world, there's a whole lot of time to be rational, I think they do a better job than the left. I don't think the left has ever been particularly good with rational thought. But what the left does get right is this sort of irrational drive towards doing good, towards helping the downtrodden, the lesser off. And it sounds like I'm giving some backhanded dig, but I'm not. If you follow my Kill Rationalism series, if you follow my Gebser series, you'll know that's not a dig. That is a sincere and reverent appreciation. So again, we want to integrate these things. Now, it's also good to hear these things because a lot of you probably found me through some sort of philosophical or artistic video I made, maybe my Kill Rationalism series, maybe my Seeing the World Integrally series, and those are the humanities, and the humanities have been suffocated by the left. And it's funny, when you bring this up, they immediately look and you go, maybe the left just has all the right opinions. Yes, okay, we'll be getting to that. Don't worry. The moral and intellectual superiority is a big part of it. So it's good to hear, I think, if for no other reason, you can actually hear the opposing views from the opposing figures, rather than what you guys do in academia, and you get together with 20 people who all agree the exact same. You construct these straw mans of people who disagree with you because you don't actually have anyone who disagrees with you, and then you just kind of knock them down. And every time you do that, your moral and intellectual superiority solidifies, and it hardens. It's very frustrating. So it's good to hear some right-wing views in philosophy and the humanities. I think they could use a little. And by the way, this would go the other way too. If it really was the humanities were suffocated by the right, we should probably hear some left-wing views. I think that'd be wise. So finally, before we get into it proper, actually, I'll do this point first. So I'm actually re-recording this video. I would have gotten this video to you 2 or 3 days ago. The first video I did was not bad, not by any means. It was pretty good. If I had to grade it, I would give it a B to a B+. It just could have been better in terms of tone. It really wasn't that bad. I wasn't going off on these rants. I wasn't calling these people stupid morons or anything like that. It just wasn't perfect, and I wanted it to be perfect. So I'm viewing this almost as like a challenge in communication. Can you ride this impossibly fine line? And can I transcend my previous way of doing things, my flawed way of doing things when I was younger, where I just kind of assert my superiority, I compensate through the ego, everyone who disagrees is the moron. I'm going to try really hard not to do that. I'm going to try really hard to be just as restrained as possible in tone. So that's going to be fun. People in my personal life are going to be like, who is this guy? What happened to this guy? Because this is not how he talks. All right. So, oh, shoot. Okay, no, we're good. Let me see. Okay. So before we get into the video proper, I want to explain a very quick reason as to why we might disagree in the first place. There's a guy out there named Jonathan Haidt, and he is a moral psychologist. So he focuses on the moral is rather than the moral should. So Kant's categorical imperative, got to go. Deontology, got to go. Utilitarianism, got to go. Virtue ethics, got to go. These tell us what we should do. Haidt's not concerned with that right now. Haidt's considering what is. How do people engage with morality divorced from these moral shoulds? How do they engage? How is it that they engage? Not how should they engage? And what he realized is that our morals derive from a pre-rational or irrational intuition. Hello, Gebsers. This makes sense. If you're a Gebserian, you know this. And then any reason we give is really just a rationalization. He had a bunch of studies that kind of prove this. But the point, what he found was this idea of moral foundations. Now, moral foundation are these 6 or 7 little, exactly that, foundations of morality. They are these units that almost have like a polar complementarity to them, and there are different ratios of the different values between groups and people. So, for example, care, harm, that's one of the sort of poles. Fairness and cheating, loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, sanctity, degradation, liberty, oppression. So the left has, especially recently, they privilege care, harm. Harm is like the only thing to the left. Anytime if you are not showing any harm done, they don't care. You can do whatever you want. It's kind of weird. Fairness and cheating, that's big on the right. Loyalty and betrayal, that's big on the right. Authority and subversion, that's big on the right. The right is very big on authority. They're very big on fairness. Sanctity and degradation, that's big on the right. The right is, you're not going to burn the flag. That's blasphemous. Not blasphemous in a Christian sense, but that's degrades the sanctity of our country. You can't do that. And then liberty, oppression, that's big on the left. The left is all about, like I said, the Dionysian dissolving of those Apollonian boundaries that they've constructed. So, after all that, my goodness, I tried to be as quick as possible with those disclaimers. I know it can go sometimes, but let's get into it. So we have the lefts, or if I call them the anointed. Now, again, I'm going to try really, really hard to speak with a tone that is neutral. I'm going to try my best. We'll see. Again, this first section is going to be vague gesturing. If I only left it at this, you would accuse me, and rightfully so, of blustering and compensating, because I'm not appealing to anything specific. That is going to come. Do not worry. We will be giving specific examples of your price controls and your disparate impact and all this stuff. Okay, don't worry. Okay, so the left, or the anointed, if you will, I call them the anointed. Of course, we're going to be pulling from Thomas Sowell's The Vision of the Anointed, as well as his other books in this series. Thomas Sowell is for politics, to me, what Gebser is to philosophy or everything else. He was just this unbelievable bomb. He was like the first writer that I read that was just, whoa. Like, it was politics 101. So if you don't like Thomas Sowell, you might not like this video. But I don't like you. Ha. Okay, so the left, or the anointed, if you will, their worldview is completely sealed off from empirical external reality. This is evidenced by a couple things. This is evidenced by their persistent embrace of policies and visions that have been tested and failed every time, whether it be communism, social liberalism, a welfare state, price controls, Mamdani. So pretty much that new Mamdani, the mayor of New York, the socialist guy, everything he's about to do. And not only does it fail in theory, it fails in terms of theory and empirical testing. And yet we're still going to do it anyways. We're still going to harm people anyways, because we'll get into it. Like I said, they've been failed every time. And at the same time, you also see this postmodern influence, this idea of you go into someone, particularly a white person, and they say A, and you say, that's racist. And you go, no, it's, and the guy goes, no, it's not even close. How is that racist? It's what? And you go, oh, well, the fact that you're disagreeing right now proves to me that you're being racist because you're getting defensive. What's happening here? They've sealed off themselves from reality. If you can't even if you can't even receive disagreement without immediately dismissing it, you just cut yourself off from any sort of external reality. Like, what are we doing? So there are all these policy decisions. We will be getting into the specifics that I disagree with, but unfortunately, even worse, the left has revealed character traits that I believe to be immoral. The glee with which they cancel people, their readiness to indict someone's character, and to do so publicly, their complete lack of principles, abuse of the First Amendment, for example. They want to destroy it when they get in power, but when they don't have that power, they'll defend it with their lives. Their complete lust for power manifesting in the form of bastardizing and desecrating the Constitution for 60 years. And then when the right gets involved and gives back 1% of what they received, they unironically start calling it a constitutional crisis. This is going to be a very, 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 very big point for me. This is going to be a huge point for me. If you want to convince me to your side, you're going to have to address this. Literally my entire life, I don't use that word lightly. The left has destroyed the Constitution. They've either ignored it, they've selectively applied it when it's conducive to them getting power to impose their view on others, or they've used it as toilet paper. And we will be getting into specifics. Do not worry. These are not vague assertions. If you want, I can rant them right now. But it's not just my whole life. Since the 60s, they have gone out of their way to move power and decision-making ability from individuals and citizens to administrators, to bureaucrats, to federal judges, to the deep state, if you will. And I do believe a deep state is real. I don't care if you think it's stupid. I don't care. I think your belief is stupid. So there you go. When they abuse the Constitution in such a way, and then when the right gets in charge and says, okay, well, I'm going to give you 2% back of what you gave to me, because I realize if I follow the rules, you're just going to destroy everything. So I'm going to give you 2% back of what you give to me, and then you call it a constitutional crisis. I had people in my personal life bring this up to me. By the way, anytime in my personal life politics gets brought up, I don't bring it up. I never bring it. I have people in my personal life like, so what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I'm just like, I have no idea. And then they press me into these arguments. It's like, okay. It is, you have to understand how frustrating it is when someone comes into you, comes to your home every morning, and they poke a hole in all four tires every single morning before you're about to go to work. And then you call him a jerk, or you go him and you smash a light, maybe a windshield or something, and they start saying, whoa, you're immoral. You're a disgusting person. Yeah, okay. You'll have to excuse me if I don't respect your opinion there. The left has an incredible ability to look at abuses of power in the Constitution and just sort of hand wave them away because they believe that Trump is a unique threat. And then this is that alone would be bad. But the real thing that gets me is when they get indignant when you do the same. That is very frustrating. When you act in manner A, and then someone acts in manner A to you, and then you start to point out, get on your soapbox and talking about how immoral it is to enact in manner A, it is disgusting. For example, I just watched a Piers Morgan, one of his shows. He had Joy Ann Reid, the MSNBC commentator, on Now, this is a woman who every other word out of her mouth is about race. All she does is stoke racial tension and racial conflict. And then with a straight face, she went on Piers Morgan and said Donald Trump ran, and she, of course, assumed that this is bad, assumingly that this is bad, ran a race campaign, a campaign based on racial issues. She was saying that as if it was a bad thing. You'll have to excuse me if I don't take you seriously. No. Enjoy, and it's not going to happen. They are the first and the quickest to run their power structures and impose their will on others, and they will do it with glee. And they will be getting more into this. And there's an example. It was funny. I have a silly little degree I'm trying to get, and I was forced to take Introduction to Disabilities class, and it was ridiculous. It was stupid. All this postmodern nonsense. But there was one point when we were talking in class, and we were talking about the American with Disabilities Act. And the professor went up there and he said the American Disabilities Act came about when legislators and people decided that they wanted to work around the Supreme Court's restricting rulings. So they created the Americans with Disabilities Act. And they said it like it was nothing. They just go, oh. And everyone just kind of goes, oh. Think about what's being said. The U.S. Supreme Court is meant to keep our legislators in line with the Constitution. The left tried to do something the right way. They didn't get it. What did they do? Instead of going back to the drawing board and doing things the morally correct way, the way that is necessary for our system to survive at all, you must have both sides acting honestly, or else it just doesn't work. They immediately just go for extra constitutional powers, and they just try to impose their power anyways. They don't care. And I remember raising my hand and bringing this up, and I said, wait, don't you think you would be upset if we had an AGA, the Anti-Gay Act? And we said because the Supreme Court rulings were limited that we wanted to work around them? Do you think that would be acceptable? And the faces that I got when I brought that up, they looked at me as if I just walked in and just like insulted every single one of their dead mothers. They looked at me like I just had a second head grew from my neck. Like I was insane for even pointing this out, for even noticing this. The casualness and the ease with which they ignore the power, the law and order, the way things are supposed to be done, and consensual governance with citizens. Personally, I think it's disgusting, in my personal opinion. So their entire worldview is essentially incurring huge cost on the downtrodden, those they verbally profess to care about, as they reap the social and psychological benefits of being on the right side of history. That's another funny phrase, by the way. They are so sure of their moral and intellectual superiority that they can now put their minds in the minds of someone 500 years later and look back and say, yep, I was the right guy. I was on the right side of history. It's very arrogant, honestly. And I don't even mean that to be like mean. I mean that to be like accurate. It really is arrogant. These, as Robert Henderson called these are luxury beliefs. The left really operates in luxury beliefs, whether it be releasing criminals, whether it be minimum wage laws, whether it be price controls, all these terrible, terrible policies that hurt the people they claim to care about the most. Is very frustrating. They see a problem, start a program to quote unquote solve it. There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. Usually their solutions always make things worse. Again, we will be getting into specific examples. The criminal justice reforms, the war on poverty, sex education. We'll get there. Don't worry. So they identify a problem, start a program to solve it, and then pat themselves on the back and kind of go back to their champagne sipping parties. They don't actually check, is this program effective? Is it productive? Or is it possibly counterproductive? They don't really do that. They just pat themselves on the back for being morally and intellectually superior, and that is all it is. It's like Thomas Sowell said, it is self-congratulations as the basis of public policy. I remember when I went on a date once, and this is obviously before my girlfriend, and it was like the second date, and maybe it was the first, and I didn't bring up, she brought up politics. I would never bring up politics on a first date, or even second or third date. And she was talking about all this stuff, and she was like, yeah, of course, I want more taxes to like fund more programs and stuff. And I was like, wait, why do you want to do that? Again, they look at you as if you're insane. If you look at them, if you just say, hey, the programs you've started have been counterproductive, they are a lose-lose, why should I want to keep doing this? They just go, well, programs are intended to help people, so that's all it is. That's all you need to know. So it's from a Gebserian perspective, they're being mythical and irrational in areas where we should be rational. So this is the problem with irrationalism. Rather, we all know the problems on this channel with rationalism. We made that very clear. But there is a problem with irrationalism. And unfortunately, the rationalists kind of created this to an extent because the rationalists treated mythology like science. So now we treat science like mythology. Well done. I believe the left have also inverted positive virtue traits, empathy, kindness, compassion, and have exploited the good nature of people to convince them to adopt their society-destroying beliefs. So if you don't toe the line on racial issues in America, you are a racist. The word racist has been so abused and so exploited for nefarious ends that I genuinely, that word means nothing to me. Anytime I hear someone being described as that online or in person, I just go, He's probably, it's sad to say this, but like, I don't know. It just means nothing. That word should carry a whole lot of meaning, but it doesn't. It just simply doesn't. It's very frustrating. I think what you're doing is you're tripping up pre-civilizational tribalism that has led to the slaughter and the deaths of millions, and it's led to enslavement. It's led to the worst, most evil aspects of the human condition. And I think the way that these people just so quickly and so effortlessly toss out those labels, I think it's gross. If you don't think it's wise to release murderers and criminals, you have no compassion. And actually, it's your fault because you're a participant in an oppressive society, even just by going to the grocery store and buying some grapes. Isn't that amazing how that works? It's amazing how that works. To the left, you are responsible for others' actions, but other people are not responsible for their actions. So you're responsible for their actions, but they're not responsible for their actions. It's pretty amazing how that works out. If you don't think it's wise to import millions of unchecked immigrants into your country, apparently you're a bigot or you hate human rights. Okay. If you insist, I think you're the one who's making life worse for everyone. And if you're the one making life worse for everyone, wouldn't that make you the bad person? But I guess you verbally profess to be good, so that doesn't matter. If you disagree with a particular minority, you're not listening. This is the Robin DiAngelos of the world. And if you think student loan forgiveness is terrible, both morally and economically, you're selfish. That's another thing. You're selfish and greedy. If you don't want to... So person A comes to person B, which is you, and they say, I want you to subsidize my $100,000 debt. You say no. Person A, who asks you to give them $100,000 with nothing in return, not even a thank you, that's not greedy. But you, not paying other people's debts that you didn't incur, that is greedy. Everything is an inversion with the left. It's not good. They blame society, who could be anyone, everyone, no one, or someone, depending on which one is more likely to allow them to grab power. They blame society on people or groups' failures, no matter how much evidence exists that personal responsibility and choices affect the outcome, and in turn, disparities. Personal responsibility is not racist. I even put LOL in my notes. It's just think about what you're saying, and I think about the bigotry of low expectations presupposed in your line there. Think about it for a second. I do agree with you that personal responsibility is not everything. There absolutely are times where the society will not let you succeed. It could be based on racial characteristics. Maybe they have like some sort of Jim Crow thing, or even worse, you could be enslaved. Yeah, personal responsibility isn't going to make that much of a difference if you're enslaved, or even in Jim Crow. Now, it's going to make a big difference in Jim Crow, but not in the way you think. You have to be personally responsible as a matter of last offense. Like, you have no other choice. But you being personally responsible is not going to make the laws change on its own. That's not going to happen. There are other things too. There are areas in which, but the problem is we live in America in 2025, and none of those really exist right now. And if anything, if there is systemic racism, it's not against minorities, my friend. It's against the non-minorities, and it's the minorities who are being privileged. So I don't know where this is coming from. Let's see. And the worst thing about all of this is that they have falsely claimed a monopoly on virtue, all as they wear the skin of virtue and commit evil, in my opinion. And that is my opinion. So they cannot even conceive of you or anyone on the right also caring about poor people and the downtrodden. Now, I will concede, there is a section of the right that's probably greater than the section of the left. That can be, I think the right is at their worst. You go up to someone on the right, let's say he's a right-wing economic guy, which I am, And you say, okay, look, we're going to take this money, we're going to tax it, and we're going to essentially do a wealth transfer. We understand that this is not the most effective and efficient allocation of scarce resources from a rational perspective. We understand this. Nonetheless, we are taking this money and we're giving it to people who have disabilities because I know we're not being 100% economical because we're human beings. We're more than economic units. We need to look out for some of us who have been dealt a bad hand. I agree with all this, by the way, and help them out. I understand, it could be going somewhere else. I get that. But these people have been dealt a bad hand. They're never going to be able to survive without our help because they can't make money because they're disabled. Okay, they're screwed. So yes, we're going to take just a little bit of money and we're going to give it to them because they need help. The worst people on the right are people who respond to that and they go, no, I'm not doing that. They can deal with it on their own. That's the worst person on the right. The best person on the right goes, yeah, this is what, at the risk of sounding a little arrogant, this is what I would say. I would say, I agree with that. We're going to do that. We just have to make sure we have to be ruthless in terms of what does and does not qualify. Because if we take this logic too far, then everyone suffers, not just this group. But yeah, I have a heart and a brain, and we're going to use both of those to help society. Beautiful. That's it. But the worst person on the right says, nah, they did something and they're a failure, so they get to do it. I don't like that. But having said that, many on the right actually do care about poor people. Many on the right actually do care about those who are lesser off. The difference between us is we don't feel the need to compensate by verbally professing and standing on your soapbox and verbally professing how much of a virtuous angel you are while enacting policies that actively harm the people you claim to care about. We just enact policies from the perspective of incorporating limiting principles, scarcity, limitations of human knowledge and the human condition, limitations of nature, all that stuff. So our policy prescriptions are a little different, but that doesn't mean we don't care about poor people. It's really like kind of like adolescent. It really is like it's like a mixture of rationalism and adolescent. Like if you disagree, you're objectively wrong. And they engage within this very childish way. Like I am the monopoly holder on virtue. I think it's compensation personally. So yeah, if you notice that the minimum wage laws hurt the lowest of the low and choose not to pursue this destructive policy, they will immediately denounce you as unsympathetic. Gotcha. And I think a lot of this really is kind of like a last grasp. I think a lot of them know they can't really win the battle of arguments here, so they just kind of pull the get out of jail free card and denounce you morally. And I think it's kind of disgusting. I don't want to go too hard again. I want to kind of ride that fine line, but this is just my opinion. And I'm sure, by the way, people on the left, I'm sure you think people on the right do disgusting things too. So. The left believes that the problems in the world exist not because of the inherited condition of the world, like I said earlier, scarcity, trade-offs, limits of human nature, but because people aren't as virtuous and intelligent as they are. That really is what it comes down to. So much of this is fueled by this idea of moral and intellectual superiority, and if you truly did believe that, the question then becomes, how do we take all decision-making ability, all power, and transfer it to those with the moral and intellectual superiority? How do we take it out of the hands of those with the most knowledge, interest, and experience in their own circumstances, and more importantly, those who pay the cost of making a mistake, and transfer it to those elite left-wing government pencil pushers who have no knowledge, no interest, no experience, and are insulated from the cost they incur on others as they impose terrible policies? Not good. It's kind of a self-flattering delusion, too. Like, I'm just so much better. Okay. If you have someone like Jean Gebster, and he doesn't do this, I'm better than you. He might be a little snob when it comes to art and stuff. I'll give you that, but that's not what I'm talking about. Jean Gebster is morally and intellectually superior to you, and yet he doesn't seem to need to grab power and impose it on other people. I don't see what the heck. Yeah, and then my last note in this little section is for all of you who don't like Trump, you can thank the liberal leftist elite for giving you right-wing populism. The left, in their moral and intellectual superiority, went way too far. You started denouncing, you started overstretching, you started crossing lines. And now we get Trump, and now you're having a conniption, and steam is coming out of your ears 24/7 because of a monster you created. Well done. Okay, so now we're going to begin to the second section, the basic worldview of the left. And I think the anointed worldview can really be summed up in this really beautiful quote by Ronald Dworkin. This quote right here is the leftist, left-wing anointed worldview. Quote, A more equal society is a better society, even if its citizens prefer inequality. I'm not even going to say anything. Just let it sit. A more equal society is a better society, even if its citizens prefer inequality. I want you to think about the implications of that statement. Go ahead. Okay, so the absolute basic worldview of the left, their understanding of human capability, is that it is vast for the anointed. That is to say that the anointed know all the answers, all the solutions, and they have essentially omnipotent knowledge. And this gives them the impetus to plan everyone's life for them. They all got together and convinced themselves that they genuinely have all the answers. They really do. The left has an ability to say there is no more debate, because debate is a part of the old way of doing things. The old way of doing things is inherently and irredeemably racist, so we can't do that. And they know all the answers. And all their answers, by the way, all their solutions are invariably just have the government come in and fix things, because it's that simple, right? Because the government, apparently, according to the left, is a monolithic agent of society that just comes in, does what its citizens want, comes in under budget, comes in under schedule, and then gets out. No, the government is not a monolithic agent of society. It is a powerful organization that is made up of multiple sub-organizations that answer to different constituencies. And because these different sub-organizations answer to different constituencies, they actually, negate each other sometimes. So on one hand, you have the governor or the government going around to middle schools and saying, hey, kids, stop smoking tobacco, it'll kill you. On the other hand, you have the government subsidizing tobacco farming. It's never as simple as that. What you do when you advocate for the government to come in and do things is what you're really doing is you're introducing political incentives. And political incentives, what they are in essence, is a way of incurring cost on others that you insulate yourself from while incurring, rewards on you. So this is the Bernie Sanders approach, where he just goes in there, he makes a bunch of promises, he exploits the naivete of everyone. He says, don't you want all this free stuff? Don't you want free college? No matter all these policies have been tried 1 trillion times and failed, doesn't matter. And then he gets all the reward, you guys get all the negative consequences of the terrible policy, and he gets to go walk around like he's some Jesus figure. It's not good. Social possibilities, they believe in solutions to problems. That is, there are no trade-offs and no limiting principles. Social causation is deliberate. They believe in singular causation. So A causes B. And when A from 200 years ago said B, and then B manifests in, let's say if A in 1921 says B, and then something related to B manifests in 2021, what they'll do is they'll say, this caused this. So they take 100 years of hundreds of millions of people who have innumerable and reciprocal social interactions that affect things, and they just ignore all of that. They say, this racist guy said this is a bad thing happening here, therefore this caused that. Their freedom orientation is the ability to achieve goals. They believe in the policies of outcomes, not process, like the example of equalized outcomes or lower prices. Now, they really do define it as ability to achieve goals. If they do not have this ability, they will tell you they are not free. You have not given me the freedom. It's kind of like an entitlement thing. Their justice orientation is they want just or equalized chances or results. So it's equity, essentially, which is obviously dumb because we are all unequal inputs, so why stress over unequal outputs? We will be getting more into this. Equity is a huge part. Do not worry. Discriminations do not, under any I shouldn't say that. Do not necessarily imply discrimination. Disparities do not necessarily imply discrimination. Cultural, geographic, biographical, and even something like birth order differences. So many factors affect disparities. We will be getting into it. Demographic, that's what I meant, not biological. Demographic. Their knowledge, they believe knowledge consists largely of the articulated intelligence of the more educated few, and it's also a social construct in search of power. So the distribution of intelligence and knowledge is concentrated in the hands of a limited elite. That is to say, these elitists, morally and intellectually superior left-wingers. Everyone else is just a dumb rube in a flyover state or whatever it is. The dumbasses are too stupid to run their lives, so we should do it. And you can think this is all silly, by the way. I would love to hear your explanation as to why the government and all these administrators, all these bureaucracies, all these NGOs, why they all keep expanding, accruing more and more power for themselves at the direct cost of us. I would like to hear your explanation for that. And of course, when the government gets, it's like I said, when the government gets more power, now they have more power over us. They have the ability to dictate our lives for us, despite the fact they have no knowledge, interest, or experience in our lives. Specialization, they believe to be highly questionable, as opposed to, of course, highly desirable. Motivations, they believe people are motivated by dispositions rather than incentives. People produce bad outcomes, according to the anointed, are evil and inferior, obviously, and if they do produce that, they must have done so because of evilness. It's kind of like, even if you had good intentions and you produce bad outcomes, you're evil, and if you had evil intentions and produce bad outcomes, you're evil too. Where if, the other way of doing it, which we'll get into in a second, is incentives. I think that seems to be a better marker of reality. Process costs, incidental. It does not matter how high a cost they incur on others, only that their vision is implemented and that they can pat themselves on the back for it. Price controls, surges in violence, economic destitution, destruction of moral norms. These are all obstacles, and they do not care about them. If they want price controls, they will implement price controls. And if it harms people, then screw them. That is their belief. And if they don't have this power, they will say they don't have any freedom. It is absurd, and it is wrong, in my opinion. They do not care about, this is luxury cost. This is luxury cost. When you advocate for having an open border, having this sort of unlimited welfare state, price controls, and all this stuff, all of these policies have terrible corroding effects on the country, and they don't care. They simply don't care. Look at the Martha's Vineyard situation. Remember that? When all these people were talking about how much they love immigrants and we have all this room for immigrants and we need to support them and be human beings. Okay, well, Martha's Vineyard, you have all the space in a very literal sense. You have all the room. You have all the money in the world, all the resources in the world. Why don't you guys take them in and they can be a part of your community? They sent them back within 1 day. They said they didn't have the resources for it, despite living in Martha's Vineyard and only receiving 2% of what a small town in Texas received who doesn't have the resources, and they sent them back. This is left-wing, in my opinion. Preferred decision-making mechanism. I'm sorry to keep harping on this point. Take equity, for example. They don't care about the cost. So if they have to lie about your grades, if they have to take someone down to equalize you to the bottom, they're going to do it, and they don't care about the negative effects of your life because they have an ideology and they will implement it. And then their preferred decision-making mechanism is deliberate plans that utilize the special talents and more advanced views of the elite few. Essentially, like I said earlier, they want to centralize all power away from the individual with the most knowledge, interest, and experience in their circumstance and move it to them. Those who have none of that, think you're Bernie Sanders, telling you what you can and cannot buy, can and cannot have. Think your Obama is telling you what healthcare you can and cannot have. It's hilarious that you guys, the left, completely wraps these industries in red tape and regulation and bureaucracy. They start to fail, and then they come and blame us, the right, as if we created it. That'll be in another video, don't worry. I have an entire separate video about economics coming, so don't worry. What else? There was a big Supreme Court ruling recently, actually, that ruled that, yes, parents can opt their 5-year-old children out of, quote, drag story hour and reading incredibly immoral books about sex and sexuality. There are some of these books that are just, I wouldn't even want to read them because they're a little inappropriate. When you have explicit sexual acts and books for 5-year-olds, that's terrible. What's even worse is that you lean on all the power institutions and say parents cannot opt their children out of this. They cannot opt their own children out of this book reading that they find inappropriate, which is inappropriate. I want you to think about the implications of that for a second. We have a bunch of people with no kids, or at least aren't parents to the kid in question, who have decided to invade the sacred relationship between parent and child. And if you did that to me, by the way, you won't be doing that to anyone else after. I have nothing to lose. I will do the time. They've invaded that relationship. They said, we are going to impose our ideology on you in the form of this incredibly inappropriate sexual material for 5-6-year-olds. And we're going to put it in these books, and if you dare to opt out, we're going to attack you. This happened in my state, by the way, so don't try to, I know the basics of it. I may not know every detail, but this did happen in my state. I heard people talk about it. So they've decided that they know your child, what they want, what they really need, better than the parent. And they're going to bet it all on this one ideology. And And if that ideology fails, who pays the cost for that? Was it the teachers who decided to invade that relationship between parent and child and then impose that ideology? No. They're going to go home and not feel anything. It's going to be the child and the parent that feel that cost. So now you potentially ruin a child's life, and you don't pay the cost. And then you're going to go home and pat yourself on the back about how moral of a person you are because you disagree with Donald Trump. You have to excuse me if I don't take you seriously. And that's putting it lightly. Those on the left fought tooth and nail. Actually, I just kind of mentioned that. So kind of decisions preferred are categorical. Everything must be categorical. There are no exceptions. There are no qualitative balance. There is no incremental substitution. What they do is they highlight a good and they privilege it above everything else. And they say, we need to attain this. But Aristotle taught us 2,000 years that any good taken too far becomes a bad. Take food. Food is a good to the human condition. You would not have it. You wouldn't be alive without it. You need food to live. Is that fair to say? Probably. What happens if you eat too much food in one sitting? Truly too much food? You will die. Okay? All good things taken too far become a bad, for lack of a better term. So if food, sticking with the food example, if food really was the only good, then literally every single human being on earth would not be working on laptops and machines. They would be growing bread and growing food. So we would not have Vivaldi. We wouldn't have any of this awesome stuff. We'd only have bread. It's so silly. Human nature is equal and unlimited. Humans, both at the individual and group level, are equal in capabilities and potential, and we can see the deficient magical structure in full effect here with this false equalization. We are all born with a blank slate, and all of our beliefs, values, attitudes, etc. are determined exclusively by the society we live in. As such, we should have equal outcomes, and disparities must necessarily imply discrimination. This is the basis of equity, the desire for equal outcomes and results. Now, this is stupid for a few reasons. Like I said, a disparity ultimately can be understood like this. To embark on any sort of successful endeavor, one must attain all the necessary prerequisites to said endeavor, and more importantly, one must attain them all at the same time. And a relatively minor change in the ratio of prerequisites can lead to large disparities. For example, if you are 4'7", I apologize, you are never going to make it into the NBA. It just is what it is. That is a demographic factor that has led to a disparity. It's got nothing to do with racism. If you are permanently illiterate, you will never be the president of the United States. I am sorry. It's just not going to happen. If you are somewhat talented in soccer, like I was, but not talented enough to be a professional, you're not going to make it. I don't know what to say. I was never going to make the Olympic track team because I'm slow, quite frankly. It's just not going to happen. There are a trillion other reasons why disparities exist. So we can drop that. Demographic factors, geographic factors, cultural factors, and even birth order differences, as well as like neuro factors, typical stuff like that, diseases, family, raising, you're starting to get the picture here. And another thing, the blank slate is just wrong. You would have to, in order for you to believe the blank slate, you essentially have to deny all of science, the entire epistem. Now, I will say, if you follow my channel, I'm a rationalist, and we don't want to deploy the scientific mode of thought in all aspects of life, right? We can bring it back and deploy it where it belongs. But when it's time to be rational, it's time to be rational. We're not going to play this pseudoscience game with you because you have this utopian vision where everything's equal. I'm sorry, it's just not how the world works. It's just you would have to deny all of science. If you want to do that, fine, but I'm just not going to take you seriously. And equity is just ridiculous. It's absurd. It's civilization destroying. It's irrational. It's nonsense. It's absurd. So the theory of language is pretty postmodern. Language no longer describes reality, but creates it. So essentially this idea, all knowledge is socially constructed in search for power. And if it's socially constructed, it must be communicated in a particular way. And usually the way we do that is by speaking in everyday life. So that's how it is. So when we say something like men or boys wear blue and girls wear pink, that's not really an objective truth. It's a socially constructed truth that we just pretend is true. So language contains reality. So if I just take a person, if I take a male and I describe him as a female, then he'll become a female. They play language games on you to try to deny reality, but the problem is they will always fail because they are denying reality, and you can always destroy the postmodern knowledge principle anytime. Done. I didn't have to talk about anything, didn't have to socially construct anything. This right here, that completely destroys this. That's why language games are always defeated by reality. It just always is. Their theory of economics is capitalism is exploitative, planned economies are superior. This is ridiculous. We will address all this in a separate video. The idea that the economic system, which places power in the individual, the one with the most knowledge, interest, and experience, to engage in economic activities that he sees fit, that will improve his life, that allows the individual to quit a job, to get hired, if of course they get hired, to leave their job at any point. That's exploitative. But a system which centralizes all power, so much to the point where some guy in a little room in D.C. can plan out the entire economy, which presupposes a removal of your rights and agency, because if we plan economy, the workers must enact the plan, because if they don't, the planned economy isn't going to work. So they're going to go up to you, Jerry, and they're going to say, hey, you're going to go in the factory, and you're going to say, no, I'm an artist, I want to do this. That's nice. You're going to go in the factory, and you're going to say, I don't want to do that. I want to be an artist. They're going to either throw you in jail, or they're going to kill you. And if you think that's over the top, I welcome you to read 20th century history. I welcome you to read 19th century history. This happens all the time. Their power orientation is something desirable at all cost. Power is in the foreground of the left's consciousness, whether it be Foucault, whether it be Marx and exploitation. They're always talking about power. And they're so sure of their moral and intellectual superiority that they must exclusively wield it. This is deficient magic structure, the exclusive claim on power. And then they also believe power is created and sustained from moment to moment, which it's not entirely wrong. I think it actually kind of aligns with the integral stuff, this idea of moment to moment, with the integral idea of time as an intensity of energy. Each moment is an energy packet, qualitatively distinct from the one that preceded it and the one that will proceed it. All right, so we're done with the second section of this video. Now, again, guys, I feel the need to repeat. These are vague gestures. We're just outlining, okay? So don't worry. So now we're going to get into my worldview, which is the tragic worldview. And then tragic, as Sol says, is not merely unhappiness, but tragedy in the ancient Greek sense, inescapable fate inherent in the nature of things. And that is true. Human nature is a real thing. I don't care what the postmodernists say. It might not be this perfectly, divisive and understandable thing, but there are aspects that are... Actually, no, I take it back. Gebser, if you follow my Gebser series, these structures and all the aspects that followed from them, that's human nature. There's no getting around it. So human capability is severely and inherently limited. We are tragically limited. We can never be as omnipotent as the elitist left says they are. We have negative aspects of our human nature: greed, selfishness, lust for power, and they must be respected and incorporated into our countenance. The left thinks these are all social constructs that can be socialized away, but they are wrong, which is why their worldview fails every time it's put into practice. So there are also deficiencies in nature as well, such as limiting principles, scarcity, trade-offs, disease, death, limits of human capability like being unable to time travel or stuff like that, geographical limitations, natural disasters, and the inherent risk of our world. Essentially, we'll never live in a utopia, not because we don't want to, but because nature and human nature won't allow it. We are limited, but not resigned to being incorrigible. We improve where we can and accept where we cannot, or we will have the acceptance forced upon us at a later and most likely violent or uncomfortable time. It's pretty simple. It's kind of strikes this balance between this Nietzschean tragic optimism. It's recognizing that yes, the Schopenhauers of the world have a point, that this world can be an unbelievably brutal place with decapitations and mass assaults on women and children and all these terrible, terrible, terrible things, but also recognize the validity of the optimist, where you can say, okay, yeah, but we still can make the world a better place. There is still goodness to this world. It's this beautiful in-between. We have good and evil, and we find ourselves right in the center of it. Let's see. Social possibilities are trade-offs that leave many unmet needs. You will always have unmet needs. So let's give an example of a parking lot. So if I go to Baltimore and I want to go buy records, get drunk, and get laid, I might drive down there and I realize, you know what, this city's pretty cramped. I think we should have more parking spots. And that is a benefit. It's an unmet need that I need more parking spots. Yeah, it's an unmet need. So what we're going to do is we're going to diverge funding from police stations, from fire stations, and from hospitals, and we're going to give it to other areas of the government, and they're going to build more parking spots. But the problem is, of course, now the hospitals, the police station, and the fire department don't have any money. They're under budget. So You didn't really solve a problem, did you? Because you created a new one. Now, somewhat clever people might say, well, why don't we just raise taxes and we can compensate for the losses from those departments? Now you've created another problem, because that tax doesn't come from just the ether. It doesn't come from just this barrel of money somewhere. It comes from people who have earned it through hours of work, people who could use that money to pay their bills, to feed their children, to pay for daycare, to save for college. So you see the point here. We are not solving anything, because every solution creates another problem in another sector. There are only trade-offs. So you have to accept nothing is going to be perfect. What is the best possible option, not the ideal option? It's very simple. It's these limiting principles. This really is what the conservatives get best. This incorporation of limiting principles into their framework, where they're not just kind of lost for the most part. Nowadays, everyone's a moron, but at their best, where they're not just kind of lost in like Edmund Burke is a good example. Just kind of bring it down here. They might not be like a Gebser level brilliant, but they know what they're talking about. Excuse me. Okay, so social causation is systemic. Innumerable and reciprocal social interactions affect change. So an example could be language. No one sat down and invented the English language. The English language was invented, if you want to call it that, systemically, as a system, which is, say, a combination of utterances, guttural noises, sounds that no one individual created. There was like you said, innumerable and reciprocal social interactions affected the end result, that is the English language. It was a systemic process, not an individual process. Remember what we said earlier. Racist guy in 1921 says this. Something like this manifests in 2021. Therefore, what the guy said in 1921 affects what's said or what happens in 2021. No, there are millions of people who affected all these things. It's not that simple. Another example is stock trading. So let's say the Dow Jones ends on 16,832. Who's ultimately responsible for the Dow ending on that number? Well, ultimately it's the stock traders, right? But none of the stock traders individually set off with the idea that it would end on 16,382. They had no idea. Maybe some of them wanted higher, some of them wanted more. All those innumerable and reciprocal interactions between the stock traders and their clients systemically affected the result. The system itself affected the result. That's social causation. So freedom, rather than the ability to achieve what you want, is exemption from the power of others. So humans have a terrible track record of imposing their will on others, leading to extreme brutality and violence that is more extreme than anything in fiction and is not conducive to a flourishing society. Freedom is at least one of the underlying principles that are non-negotiable. Having said that, you always have to have qualitative limits. You can't do things like, you can't have complete freedom. You can't murder people. You can't assault women. You can't assault children. You can't slander people. There's always qualitative limits. You always have to do this. And you can see the rationalism on display. If you don't have any qualitative limits, you're going to have ridiculousness. But freedom should be something that is respected, something that is revered. I think something that is brought such great wealth of benefit to the world, morally, economically, civilizationally. It might not be literally everything, but it's important to respect. And I say that because the far left doesn't respect it. They want to turn you into a cog in their planned economy, all as they complain that you're a cog in a capitalist economy, which is laughable. Or you have the far right who's rejecting liberalism from more right-wing view, and they just want to do the Leviathan, the kind of the right-wing strong state, not necessarily communist, but it is a command economy, and they don't care about freedom either. It's like fascists, they don't care about freedom. So our justice orientation is process rules with just characteristics. So process rules with just characteristics. Law and order, rights, due process. Humans also have a terrible track record with justice, as it was rarely ever served and largely ignored during the times of the monarchy. And of course, the further back you go, things just get worse and worse. Any semblance of justice and moral progress has resulted from a system, the Constitution, and our sense of moral responsibility engendered by the rational ego. So essentially, systems that are neutral, or at least as neutral as possible, rather than this friend-enemy distinction where anyone who's a comrade can do whatever they want and we're never going to get them in trouble. You see this a lot in the deep state. The deep state does incredibly unconstitutional things, incredibly overarching things that break the rules. Like no one could disagree with. If you're biased, you'll disagree. I don't care. But they don't get charged. Meanwhile, Trump, who didn't do anything wrong, at least in terms of that Letitia James thing, that little crime that no one had ever been prosecuted before, that had no victims, and these supposed victims were actually really happy with what happened, and they tried to springboard off that to throw him in jail and remove him from the ballot. No one gets thrown in jail for that, even though it later came out that Letitia James actually was the one who committed the crimes that she accused Trump of. No one ever gets in trouble. I guess they're on the team. Knowledge consists largely of the unarticulated of the many. So rather than the distribution of knowledge being resting in a small elite few of leftist liberal elite, it is distributed. It's spread. My goodness, it's going longer. Excuse me. It's spread out across the entire population. Excuse me. My goodness. Though unequally, of course. We're not all equal in terms of knowledge or intellect. I am not as intelligent as Jean Gebser or knowledgeable as Jean Gebser. It's just kind of is what it is. We also realize that intelligence can manifest in many different ways besides just pure thought, such as engineers, farmers, or economists, which is to say, it can manifest in ways, all those states that you very snidely consider flyover states. Yeah, there are engineers there, there are farmers there. They might not be writing about Dasein, but they actually make civilization function, and they actually have it operate, and they build infrastructure and all this stuff. So it's not just this sitting around, oh, I'm a deontologist, I'm a virtue. Okay, I'm not saying that's not valuable, but it's not everything. Specialization, we believe is highly desirable, or at least we did in the rational phase. As long as we leave room for integral consciousness, of course. I put that in my notes. It's highly desirable as long as we are aware of our integral consciousness. Specialization allows people with disparate interests and intelligence to find their niche, improve the field, and in turn, our lives. Be it science, philosophy, mathematics, economics, or anthropology, we recognize that no single man could ever possibly come to such an intimate knowledge of all aspects of the world and the human condition so as to completely negate their will and the wisdom transmitted by the traditions they've created, besides Gebser, of course. No, but in all seriousness, take Gebser. I mean, Gebser is easily the most intelligent and knowledgeable person I've ever encountered in my life. You would have to multiply his intelligence and erudition to the 10th power, and you wouldn't even come close to someone as intelligent and as knowledgeable so as to take all aspects of his entire civilization, all the traditions from now and past, and completely toss them aside and start something new. It will never, ever, ever happen. It is arrogance, it is ego, and it is narcissism, and it is wrong. I don't care how smart you are. If Jean Gebser came up to me and told me that, I would laugh in his face, and I'd probably knock him out, because no, you're not doing that. You're not dictating my life because you understand what the real meaning of the yin and the yang is. It's not happening. So traditions, a lot of the left just views traditions as these kind of irrational ball and chain, but they can be, undeniably. But a lot of times traditions are the transmission of cultural knowledge and wisdom by people who are facing the exact same problems that we face and probably have incurred greater costs than we did, and they're transmitting that knowledge for our own benefit. And now, admittedly, not all of them are great with the evolution of consciousness structures. Yeah, some tradition in the magic structure might not work out in the mental structure. Okay, no, I'm here for that, but I don't think we should dismiss them on principle. I think that's silly. Motivations are incentives. It's like Sowell says in his Basic Economics, show me the incentives, I will show you the outcomes. Sometimes it really is that simple. People will follow incentives. You must. That's why capitalism is superior to communism. It has better incentives. Profit is nothing if not an incentive for you to allocate scarce resources effectively and efficiently, and not only to do that, but to provide it at a price that someone else in society is willing to pay. That's economic. That's good. Not a planned economy with no profit or loss system, so you have no idea how you're allocating these scarce resources effectively and efficiently. And because you don't know that, we're just continuing to fund these terrible economic industries. Just ridiculous. And wealth is very important, by the way. All you philosophers out there, you watch two mothers see one last piece of baby formula. You watch how your deontology and your virtue ethics and all that stuff, that gets cut down. You don't have that stuff without wealth. So I think you should take economics very seriously, because I take economics very seriously, because I recognize how important it is. That's not to say philosophy isn't important. They're all important. That's the point. We need to stop doing this rationalist one or the other and recognize they're all important. You watch the animal emerge from that, because they will not allow you. Like, oh, well, you gave a Kantian argument, so therefore I'm going to let my child starve. It's just not going to happen. It's borderline delusional. Okay. Process cross. This is crucial. This is big. We view them as crucial. So we believe, we'll put it this way. The cost of a policy, program, or way of doing things are incredibly important. Seeing as we view ourselves as moral people, we are skeptical of incurring costs on others as we reap all the benefits. Power is not to be sought at all cost, as a sacrifice of the soul, and desire to improve the spiritual present is unacceptable under any circumstance. That is true, by the way. True strength comes from a spiritual a recognition that you are the spirit. You are the spiritual world. In the same way that a molecule is an individual entity unto itself, when you put them all together, they create a cell. So on one hand, the molecule is part, but it is also whole. It's also part of the collective. You are part, you are an individual autonomous unit, you are also a part of this spiritual cosmic game going on. So anything that happens to you on Earth, so what? This is just the terrestrial plane, and the real plane, it's all going to be good on that, so who cares? That's to say, we're not going to sacrifice our soul for power, because we recognize that power on Earth is not the end game here. It's not even close. It is not okay to kill arbitrarily or simply rob Peter to pay Paul. So when we're implementing a policy and we see that the policy is counterproductive, we stop and we say, okay, this we need to go back to the drawing board, because this is not good. Where I believe that the left starts a program, that program is counterproductive, and they don't even bother looking at it. They just ignore it. They don't even bother. They've started the program. What else do you need? We started the program. I proved how good of a person I am. So decision-making preferences preferred, systemic processes that convey the experiences and reveal preferences of many. So the free market, of course, and the free market is just you. Anytime you go out and buy something, it's just people in the economy. That's all it is. Like I said earlier, people with the most knowledge, interest, and experience is buying and selling things because they know it's more likely to produce effective or efficient results. But you can't really have that when you have some pencil-pushing Bernie Sanders dictating your lives for you. The free market's one, of course, as well as the justice system and not rogue federal judges. We'll get there. Democracy or consensual governance and social sorting systems of various sorts. So we believe in these sort of systems that express the will of millions rather than just one guy with limited knowledge running the world for everyone, incurring costs on everyone while he gets all the benefit. Even the Constitution, which is not being interpreted away. Again, we're no longer following the system of the Constitution. We're just going with whatever works. Kinds of decisions preferred. Incremental. This will be the last point. Not omnipotent, something that is worth the pain of acquiring it so that it can be shared. Due to respect for trade-offs and scarcity, we recognize that the attempt to willfully improve society by leaps and bounds carries more potential for harm than good, and that even the slightest improvements have come at an extremely high and violent cost. As such, improvements are incremental, as opposed to this categorical, we must do this at all costs, we must lower the price of grain or whatever it is, or bread or whatever. So that'll be probably where I end it here. Now, again, I feel the need to reiterate. These are all a lot of vague assertions. I understand why if I only left it here, you wouldn't take... It'd be interesting to think of like, oh, it's interesting to see where he's coming from, but it doesn't mean anything because it hasn't really come to life yet with examples. We will be getting into examples. This is already over an hour. So I didn't want to bog this down even further with examples, but we'll probably be doing that in the next video, and then after that we'll probably do economics, and then we'll see where we're at. We'll probably do I don't know how it's going to work. I have to go back and figure out how I want to plan this. So it'll come alive as I do it. I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you guys being cool. You guys usually are. My subscribers are cool. Usually when I get pushback usually when you guys push back on me, you're pushing back on either my ideas or Gebster's ideas, and you guys are super cool about it. But usually when I get pushback that's either dishonest or just is kind of bitter, it's people from the outside. It's usually rationalists kind of stumbling upon their enemy camp. So I have pretty good hope, at least, that you guys are going to be cool. I think you guys are pretty open-minded. I think if you're into Gebster at all, I think you probably have to have somewhat of an open mind. And hopefully you guys heard some things that'll make you think, oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought of that way. Or it gives you an appreciation for maybe your right-wing neighbor or something like that. Because sometimes, these people feel these things and they agree with me, but they can't articulate it like I can. And that'll become more clear as we get more and more into this series. So I love you guys. I apologize for the political stuff, but I actually had a subscriber ask for it. So if you didn't like this, blame that subscriber. You guys are the best. I love you guys so much. And I'll see you soon. Thank you guys.